A warm up from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have Curtis Rogers aboard. He does great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love, and we're going to be chatting with him about what we all saw on Saturday. Coupled with that, we're going to be chatting about just really the West Coast college basketball landscape. Obviously, it's been a massive year for Arizona, but could we see a few teams be able to rise up? I know that he's out there in Seattle, so we've got to talk about that Washington versus Seattle matchup for today as well. So we're going to have some fun here in segment number 2, and then in the final segment, we're going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter as per usual. Please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we had an incredible day of college basketball on Sunday. Let's dive into it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Won't discuss too much of that Gonzaga versus UConn game from Friday, which I was unable to do because of the Saturday podcast, but we will talk plenty of Gonzaga in segment number 2, so don't worry, that will be served. And before we dive into more of the major games that we saw on Saturday, and I saw this just before coming on, and I think that's worth mentioning. UC Irvine scored 121 points in a game against South Dakota, 121-178. The final is for UC Irvine. They got off 85 field goal attempts in a 40-minute game. Just absolutely insane. They had just 5 turnovers to South Dakota's 18. They won the rebound battle 43-24. 8 different guys put up at least 11 points. That was just absolutely awesome. So we had to give the kids from UC Irvine a little bit of a shout out. Zot for the Anteaters. And how about Ole Miss staying unbeaten as well? They win and cover against Cal by kind of 88-78. As for Ole Miss, do I think that this is one of the best teams in all of college basketball? I still need to see a little bit more before putting them in that regard, but I mean, this team just keeps on winning games. For Cal, they go 10 of 30 from three-point range, and for Ole Miss, 5 of 7 from distance was Jamin Brakefield, who was able to put in their 27 points. Ole Miss won the turnover battle 11-8. They did lose the rebound battle. As for Cal, Fardaws Aimaq was able to chip in their 12 rebounds, but for Ole Miss, 12 of 21 from three-point range. An incredibly impressive showing there. And right now, your best cover team in all of college basketball, I don't think a lot of people would guess this, but it's actually the Minnesota Gophers. They were off on Saturday, but the next best team in terms of cover rate, Arizona. They entered into the day without a blown cover all season long. That did come to an end after they played just what was a tremendous game against Purdue. 92-84 the final. We'll certainly be hitting upon this with Curtis in segment number 2, but for Purdue, the way that Braden Smith came out in the first half and shot was impressive. He and Fletcher Lawyer in that first half combined 32 points. They combined for 53 points overall for the game. And then Zach Edey, giant of the earth, 9 boards, 22 points, but also chipped in there a pair of steals. He helped facilitate the offense with 5 assists. For Purdue, they win the rebound battle by kind of 32-26, and for Arizona, they did get Caleb Love to be able to fire on all cylinders, 29 points, but a little bit of a difference maker here was that Arizona has been doing a great job with their bench, only about 2 points in this game. I do think that we're staring at a pair of very good title contenders, but certainly it was Purdue's day, and this was out there in the state of Indiana, and I do think that that made quite a bit of a difference as well, but a very interesting display there. Also involving a Big Ten team. Indiana did not get the win, but you know what? They showed well against Kansas. They lose by a kind of 75-71. They were without Xavier Johnson, and Trey Galloway was able to step up. 28 big points, goes 2 of 4 from three-point range. Yeah, Khalil Ware once again do his part. 11 points, 15 rebounds. Problem is, still have a backcourt that is very janky when it comes to Indiana. And for Kansas, how about Kevin McCullough chipping in their 21 points, 6 boards, and Hunter Dickinson just another 17 and 14 game. Still have my question marks with guys like Marco Jackson. Are you going to be able to get anything off this bench? As well as Kansas did not play anyone off their bench for north of 8 minutes. That is a little bit concerning to me, and then also involving the Big Ten was the most stunning result of the day, in my opinion. Like, Purdue being able to knock off Arizona, that's not stunning. Michigan State not just winning against Baylor. If they would have won, I would have been a little bit surprised, but I wouldn't have been stunned. The way that they knocked them off 88-64 really stood out to me. Michigan State, who's been having some bad three-point shooting variance all season long, they go 8 of 12 from distance. Ty Walker, 25 points, 5 steals, 4 assists, 3 rebounds for Michigan State. They win the rebound battle 29-20. This Baylor team came in number 1 in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis and in three-point shooting percentage. Just 6 of 19 from the outside, as they had Ray J. Dennis and Yves Messi both chip in there 11 points. And for Dennis, he did have the 7 assists, but also 6 turnovers. Michigan State, who doesn't force a lot of turnovers, forced Baylor into 21 turnovers. An incredibly impressive display there, and this was incredibly sad, as Ohio State, they knocked off UCLA 67-60 in a game that saw both teams go a combined 2 of 24 from three-point range. As the way that UCLA is playing right now, they are going to be probably very much an under team moving forward, and UCLA 1 over and 8 unders. That is tied for the best under mark in college basketball. The only other team that rivals that is Dartmouth. They also have played 1 over and 8 unders, and they actually fell to Lemoyne on Saturday. It was Lemoyne's first home game as a Division I team. They were a 1.5 point underdog, and Lemoyne got it done 80-54. This was a total of 137.5, so you're able to maintain that under run, but for this UCLA team, certainly they are going to be looking to play games that are going to be underwhelming, to say the least. The lone team that has yet to play a game under the total, by the way, that would be Arkansas Pine Bluff. They were off over the weekend, but a team that was playing and a team that played another over, that would be the Minutemen of UMass, as UMass, with a big win over West Virginia, they were able to get the job done by a count of 87-79, and West Virginia, as was many teams, they were getting back these guys that were transfers from a second school that were ineligible to begin the season. They were able to get back Kirk Risa, which that was a completely different situation. That was the old FBI sting. And for West Virginia as well, they were able to get back out there on the floor. Noah Farrakhan, as well as they were supposed to get back Raekwon Battle too. Raekwon Battle did not play in this game. Farrakhan, he actually did chip in there 15 points, went 7-11 from the floor. So go figure on where they would have been without him. But for this UMass team, they did a very solid job winning that rebound battle 47-32. Yeah, Josh Cohen along with Matt Cross combined for 20 boards, 32 points. So I did like what I was seeing there. The DK Network write-up pick, we were able to get it in on the number they gave out overnight. This was one in which before tip-off it did steam up, so I apologize if you did get late, but we did get there on the St. Joe's versus Iona over, and we saw a 29-1 run in this one, by the way. St. Joe's just completely clobbered Iona, 83-58, as for St. Joe's, they were just hot from three-point range. 15 of 30 from distance, as you had 26 big points out of Eric Reynolds II, and for Iona, man. So it's been rough for this team. They have shot below 40% from floor in each of their last 3 games. They go 7 of 30 from three-point range. I know that there are a few Iona faithful that listen to this podcast. I feel for you guys, and I do think that it's going to get better. But, man, been a little bit of a tough start to the season. It's been a good start to the season for Cincinnati. They have been one of your most profitable teams in all of college basketball, but on Saturday, they took it on the chin against Dayton. Dayton was able to rally in a big way, 82-68 the final. As for Cincinnati, they were in control a little bit early, and then Dayton was really able to put some distance out in front of them towards the back half of the second half, as Dayron Holmes was the best player in this game, 28 points. You saw Dayton go 8 of 21 from 3, but 28 of 30 at the free throw line. I was asked by someone, what do you make out of everything that we've seen this year? And I was talking about the bad free throw shooting. Well, Dayton, very good at the free throw line, while Cincinnati, 8 of 16 at the free throw line. That wasn't the end-all be-all, but would have helped if Cincinnati made some free throws. As for Cincinnati, they've been rock solid on the glass, and they were once again 41-34. They win the rebound battle with Aziz Bandengo being able to chip in their 12 rebounds, but 6 of 25 from three-point range. That's a bit of an issue, but no issues for this team, as you saw Houston get it done. They did not cover, but they were able to get a win against Texas A&M 70-66. I wanted to see how Houston was going to be able to perform against better competition, and you know what? It was a little bit wobbly for Houston. They did pretty much play even up on the turnover battle. In terms of the rebound battle, it was 37-37, but the man that was able to get Houston to the window in this one, in my opinion, was Jamal Shedd. Just the way that he runs the point. 12 points, 8 assists, pair of blocks, 2 turnovers, a steal. He does a good job of being able to free up shots for guys like LJ Cryer, who went 4 of 10 from 3. Emmanuel Sharp went 5 of 13 from distance as well. And for Texas A&M, they were just trying to have Wade Taylor try to drag them to victory. 34 points out of him. The rest of the team had 32. So the imbalance was certainly there. James Madison just continues to be a machine. They were able to win. They were able to cover by a count of 88-71. This was a closing number, more around about 15.5 to 16 for James Madison. 12 of 32 from three-point range. This team is just playing at warp speed at this point. They did go under the total. Total was at 165.5, and we have been seeing these high totals just going over. Like, for instance, you saw this total open up at north of 170, dropped to 167.5, but both teams, they were able to score 90 plus to be able to get it over very easily in that Belmont versus Stanford game. So you do want to be taking note there, but it was an incredibly fun game to watch, to say the least, for a James Madison team that is just so well-rounded, even though Indiana State was unable to get the cover length 15.5. Another good performance out of them. They knocked off Ball State by a count of 83-72, and this was a very nice performance as well. How about Florida Atlantic being able to rally after a rough first half against St. Bonaventure, 64-54? As for Florida Atlantic, they were down in this game early by double figures. They were able to claw their way back, and I believe that they actually entered into halftime with a lead, and then they were able to separate a little bit late. For Florida Atlantic, they went just 5 of 20 from 3, while St. Bonaventure went 7 of 18 from distance, but this team still found a way by being able to generate 21 turnovers, while St. Bonaventure was only able to make 20 field goals. For Florida Atlantic, they win the rebound battle 36-32. Once again, a nice gold star for them. This game got very, very hairy. Obviously, no cover for Virginia as they were laying right around 15.5, but they staved off elimination and they staved off a bad upset against Northeastern, 56-54, the final for Virginia. What has been their bread and butter this year has been forcing turnovers, and that led them to victory. Northeastern, 17 turnovers, Virginia, 5. Virginia was ice cold from the floor, going just 2 of 14 from three-point range, but because they were able to force those turnovers, they were able to overcome the fact that they did get a little bit lost on the glass. Joe Pridgeon, 11 points, 13 rebounds for Northeastern. Northeastern wins that rebound battle, 35-28, but Virginia, they're able to get the job done, and they're able to stave off what would have been a really bad upset. This was just a really good display from Kentucky, and legitimately, both teams in this matchup, I mean, they are both rock solid in my opinion. 87-83, Kentucky takes down North Carolina. For Kentucky, what I thought was very impressive is they threw Armando Bacot completely out of his game. 6 turnovers, 4 fouls, 9.6 rebounds for Armando Bacot. As a result, Kentucky able to win that rebound battle 43-32. And for Kentucky, you had off the bench Robert Dillingham, Reed Shepard combined for 28 big points. They've got a really nice 8 to 9 man rotation. Now they've got Ogano Oyesu in the fold as well. He was dealing with an injury towards the beginning part of the season. Really like what I'm seeing out of this Kentucky team, even when they're not going into flamethrower mode from three-point range. They're finding ways to win, and it was big for this Creighton bunch to find a way to win, and they did so against Alabama, 85-82. And it wasn't like Creighton had one of their big three-point shooting nights. They went just 6 of 18 from the outside, but the way that they were able to win this game is that they were able to rely upon their main starting 5 as Ryan Kalkbrenner, Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander, a combined 61 points out of those guys, but they still got good minutes out of Fred King. They still got good minutes out of Fran Farabelle. I do think that this team needs a little bit more balance, and they've been able to deliver quite a bit of that. And for Alabama, they also went 4 of 22 from 3. I actually think that this was a very encouraging loss for Alabama, losing by 3, shooting 4 of 22 from three-point range the way that they did. Honestly, a relatively good display. This was a good display from Oklahoma as well. Recognize that it was just against UW Green Bay, but hey, I like what I'm seeing out of UW Green Bay, and Oklahoma 81-47 winners. As for UW Green Bay, 20 turnovers to 17 made field goals, so that was just complete and utter domination. And Chicago State, coming off of their big one against Northwestern, 63-62, they win outright against Valparaiso. So how about them Cougars? Another win for them. NC State, they just get within the number against Tennessee, 79-70, as NC State goes 8 of 18 from three-point range. Tennessee defense did look a little bit better. NC State was able to sink some threes, but all in all, I did like what I was seeing just watching this game as Josiah Jordan-James and Kai Ziegler, a combined 43 points, and that's big as well. With Ziegler dealing with a little bit of injury, him being able to deliver the performance that he did, very good high marks there. And among the teams I've already mentioned that have been really good against the spread, St. Joe's is now now 9-2 against the spread. UC Irvine, by the way, was giving them a little bit of shout out, 8-2 against the spread. And South Carolina thus far this season has been very good against the spread. They're currently 8-2, but they did not look so great on Saturday. They got a close call against Charleston Southern, a team that they were favored by north of 20 points, 73-69 the final. As for Charleston Southern, they hold in there because they did a relatively solid job of taking care of the ball. They won the turnover battle by kind of 6-5, and for South Carolina, was thinking there was going to be 3-point shooting regression, went just 6 of 25 from 3, and Tajay Kelly, 22.7 rebounds for a Charleston Southern team that, are they amazing? By no stretch of the imagination are they, but at the same time, was a very encouraging sign out of them. Another team I mentioned that has been pretty solid against the spread, Florida Atlantic, with what they did on Saturday. They are now 8-3 against the spread, and Indiana State, I believe, has covered north of 70% of their games as well. But right now, the worst team against the spread in all of college basketball is Pacific. And Pacific just got absolutely dump trucked once again. They're now 1-11 against the spread, and 2 years ago, this was your worst against the spread team in all of college basketball. Pacific, during the 2021-22 season, went 4-22-2 against the spread, and they're right now well on pace for that. Their lone cover, by the way, was an outright win on the road against Cal. Third straight loss of north of 20 points for Pacific, 82-61. UC Davis just completely dumps them on the road. As for Pacific, his team had 16 turnovers, 22 made field goals, and they lost the rebound battle, and I'm not even kidding here, 32-16. Pacific got 16 rebounds in a 40-minute game. Good grief. I mean, it has been really, really rough for them. Right now, they are the low man on the totem pole in terms of against the spread record. I know that you guys love fades, and, well, IUPUI has been one of the biggest ones in all of college basketball. They lose outright at home against Lindenwood as a slight favorite, 73-67. Some places had this as high as 2.5. I'm not sure why. You also had, in this game, I'm not even kidding, a guy in a LeBron James Miami Heat jersey trying to check in for IUPUI. One of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. I mean, if you're looking for like a minute of good, clean, quality fun, look that up on Twitter/X. That was great. I retweeted that myself at GUnit_D1 as Jalen Counter had 23 points, and the rest of the team did nothing. And for Lindenwood, it's not going to be a rosy season for them. But man, at the very least, they aren't our good friends in IUPUI. And at this time last week, Georgia Southern was your lone team without a cover against the spread. They've now covered back-to-back games. They lose, but they cover against UNC Wilmington, who's been a good cover team this year, 82-77. As for UNC Wilmington, they have full control of this game, but Georgia Southern gave you a nice little bonsai charge late. They go 10 of 22 from three-point range with Tyron Moore chipping in their 30 big points. This has been a Georgia Southern team that has dealt with a lot of injuries, so you do want to be taking note of that. It feels like they're starting to get more of their guys a little bit healthier, and the wheels are starting to turn for this team. As you also have LSU, who's been one of your bigger fades in all of college basketball to lead off the day. They got dumped by Texas by kind of 96-85 for Texas. They are back to hitting threes, 10 of 20 from distance. Max Abmas, Tyrese Hunter, they were able to combine for 39 points. And for LSU, they lose this game going 11-25 from three-point range, but they lose the rebound battle in this one. You had Jordan Wright be able to deliver 33 points, but past that, not much else. Now, the good news for this team is that Jalen Cook, who is one of those two-time transfers that was ineligible to begin the season, he's now back in the fold, so that is something that you do like to see for them. But, man, not such a rosy performance there. And then Arkansas, now 3-8 against the spread. They win, but they got all that they wanted against Lipscomb as they played this in North Little Rock, 69-66. And it looked like Arkansas was going to run and hide with this game. Arkansas gets up 61-41 with about 10.5 minutes remaining. They score 8 points the rest of the way. And as a matter of fact, they were up 15 with 9 minutes remaining. And well, not only did they not cover, but they got a big giant sweat as Arkansas just 5 of 15 from 3. And if Lipscomb doesn't go 7 of 30 from the outside, as they've right now been dealing with an injury to Jacob Onyesovic, your top scorer from season ago, they probably pull off that win outright. So we saw a wild and crazy day in college basketball. And if you're taking a look trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball over the last 7 days, it's been a pretty even split between overs and unders. In the last 7 days, 90 overs, 89 unders. We've had a few pushes along the way as well, but it's really been the home underdogs that have risen up. Last 7 days, 27-19-2 against the spread for home underdogs, and favorites are getting destroyed. Favorites 79, 102, and 5 against the spread. That makes underdogs hitting at a 56.4% clip against the spread in the last 7 days. That's what we'd like to see. And for the first time all season, underdogs now lead in the against the spread race against favorites. Overall for the season, 844, 836, and 24 against the spread for favorites. Meanwhile, unders, they're still having a little bit of a tough time. They're still hitting at just 49% compared to the 51% of overs, as we have seen 861 overs to 826 unders. So that's what we're all seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on a rambunctious college basketball Saturday. Now let's take a look at what we're going to be getting on Sunday. Let's react to everything that we did see on Saturday as well and get a West Coast lens as well. We're going to be talking a little Gonzaga, talking a little Washington, Pac-12, and so much more with Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man. It's Curtis Rogers. He does absolutely exceptional work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at so many things that are happening out there in the Pacific Northwest. For those that like baseball, he does a great job following the Seattle Mariners. For those that like college basketball, he follows all 362 Division I teams. Obviously, out there in the Pacific Northwest, we're looking a lot at the Washington Huskies, Gonzaga Bulldogs, what have you. But Curtis covers it all. You're able to follow him on Twitter/Instagram/X as well over at A Kid from Kent. All together. And Curtis, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, always love hopping on with you here on this podcast. And what a slate we've got this weekend. And I mean, just looking ahead at the next week of games out here on the West Coast, it's really ramping up this week. Some incredible non-conference matchups as we head into the holiday season. I mean, this has been a really fun weekend of basketball.
Oh, it certainly has been. And Curtis, before we dive into what we all saw on Saturday and what we're going to be getting on Sunday as well, we do need to circle back to Friday, because one of the biggest games that we have seen this college basketball season was UConn going to the state of Washington. Wasn't to the kennel, but I mean, it was out there in Seattle, right there in Gonzaga's backyard. And they went out there. They were able to get a nice double-figure win. And what did you make out of this result? Because I think that there's a lot of people saying that this is not quite the same Gonzaga team, and I don't think that they're wrong on that, but just in watching that game, I was just more or less really impressed with what UConn was able to do, rather than off-put by Gonzaga, though I do feel like there was a little bit of both involved as well.
Yeah, I think the story from this one is just how good UConn looked. I think they look very much the part of one of the premier title contenders again this season, Donovan Clingan. I mean, what a performance, 21-8, 8 of 11 from the field. He was fantastic for the Huskies in that one. I think Gonzaga right now, I mean, you and I have kind of talked about it a little bit. They just don't have that one guy that they can go to when they need a bucket. As we've seen over the last few years, that's just been kind of a staple of Gonzaga's program. I do wonder kind of what Gonzaga would look like with a healthy Steele Venters this year. Venters was incredible last year with Eastern Washington. He was a transfer for Gonzaga, was expected to get starter minutes this year. Obviously, he gets hurt before the season even started. He's out for the year. So Gonzaga kind of reeling in that regard. I don't think this is, red alert by any stretch of the imagination for the Zags. I think the loss to Washington was a little more concerning than the loss to UConn, because they had that game in control for most of the night at Hackett against the Washington Huskies, I should say. Kind of confusing with back-to-back games against teams called the Huskies in Seattle. But I think Gonzaga's loss to Washington, I think that set off a few more alarms than anything that they did on Friday against UConn. I think they just ran into a buzzsaw right now. I think UConn very much with a possibility of a repeat, and we haven't seen that in so long since, Florida Gators did it famously. I think there's a handful of teams right now, probably about 4 or 5 of them, that I could make a case for winning a national championship, and UConn is firmly in that group.
Oh, absolutely. And I do feel like we had two teams that should be in that group, and they did battle on Saturday. We did see Purdue be able to get it done against Arizona, but that's one of those games as well. I was talking about it in the UConn versus Gonzaga game. Sure, you could be a little bit off put by Gonzaga, and sure, you could be encouraged by UConn. I do think that having a little bit of both is very much reasonable there. But when it came to this game, I don't think that there's anything other to be said other than when these two teams hook up again, if they do hook up again, it should be another relative toss-up game. Though Arizona got down early, they were able to rally very late. I do feel like this game being played in Indiana was a little bit of a difference maker for Purdue. And I think that we saw two of the best teams in all of college basketball, like perhaps 1 and 2, do battle on Saturday, as that was a whale of a matchup.
Yeah, what a pace that was in that matchup. The first half, they didn't even get the under-16 timeout in until after the 12-minute timeout. I mean, they were really letting those two teams play. I mean, just a blistering pace. You look at some of the differences in that game. I look at rebounding on the offensive glass specifically. Both teams came away with, a similar amount of total rebounds, but Purdue with 11 offensive boards to Arizona's 5. Getting those second chance points was big for them in that game. And then also, I mean, the play of Smith and Lawyer out of the backcourt. If those two guys are playing like that, watch out. Purdue is maybe the best team in the country. If they're able to get that kind of contribution from those guys, they combine for 53 points, shooting over 50%, both those guys. I thought Arizona's defense, especially on the perimeter, left a lot to be desired. I know Kylan Boswell was taken out of the game for a little bit just because he wasn't rotating very well defensively. They went with Jaden Bradley for a little bit defensively in the second half, and that kind of opened things up for Arizona as they made it a little bit closer. They got it to within 4 at one point after being down by as many, I think, as 15. That was a really fun game between those two. Even with the loss, I would not take Arizona out of the conversation of national championship caliber teams. Right there with Purdue, right there with UConn. Kansas is another one that I look at. Surprised today with Baylor getting their doors blown off by Michigan State. Now, Michigan State was a preseason top 5 team. We know the talent is there. I hope that we get a rematch between Arizona and Purdue because that was a lot of fun. If you're a casual college basketball observer, a lot of fun to be had. You can't have it on Peacock. You got to put it on a channel that everybody gets because I know there was a lot of frustration from a lot of people being like, what the heck? This game is not on basic cable. It's not on any sort of, ESPN platform, what have you. No, it was on Peacock. But for those who made the purchase, they were rewarded with a fantastic game.
And Peacock subscribership at an all-time high as a result. And, I mean, it's the second best-selling point they've ever had. I forget that who performs that song, Let Me See Your Peacock, but that might be number 1. This game was number 2, as Curtis Rogers, who does absolutely tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And it is so interesting to take a look at the landscape of West Coast Hoops because we did see Arizona lose that game, but obviously nobody's really feeling like, oh no, Arizona, let's pound the alarm for this team because that was just an absolutely tremendous game. But we did see Santa Clara get their 3rd win against a Pac-12 team on Saturday, which I never thought I'd be saying that. Typically, when you're referring to a West Coast Conference team getting 3 wins over the Pac-12, you think of either St. Mary's or Gonzaga, most likely Gonzaga, but that happened. And then we did see UCLA in a game that was just a total eyesore. They and Ohio State went 0 of 13 from three-point range in the first half and finished up a hearty 2 of 24. They lose that game, but what do you think the landscape what do you think the landscape of the Pac-12 is? Because, Arizona, I think, is very clearly that number 1 team. And then who you like after that is pretty much the flavor that suits you best because everyone else in that conference looking pretty weak.
Yeah, they're the only ranked team, too, in that conference. And I think a lot of people, myself included, anticipated USC being a lot more competitive this season. They dropped that game to Long Beach State at home at the Galen Center in Bronny James's debut. That's not going to look, great on the resume. UCLA running out of opportunities to improve their resume before conference play. I'm looking at this conference right now, Greg, and is it maybe a 3-team bid right now for the NCAA tournament? I think Colorado is a team I could see playing in March. If
Washington is actually warming. Yeah.
It's true. Washington getting that quality win against Gonzaga. That's a nice little resume patter as well. The Huskies are a team, considering that most of the Pac-12 is down this season and seeing the pressure that's on Mike Hopkins, maybe they can wiggle their way up near the top quarter of that conference, make some noise in the Pac-12 tournament this year. The opportunity definitely exists. You talked about Santa Clara getting that win over Washington State. Washington State coming into that game was 8-1. They hadn't really tested themselves. Santa Clara was probably the best team in terms of just, overall program prestige that Washington State has faced this season. But I think the Cougars are a team that could maybe stand to finish better than what I think a lot of people had anticipated them doing this season. There's going to be opportunities for teams to kind of wiggle their way in if the Pac-12 wants to be more than, a 3-team bid league. But right now, Arizona is the only one I think that has a firm case to be in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, they're probably going to be on the top line if they continue at this pace. I wouldn't expect them to get much competition at this point for the regular season Pac-12 title. It just seems like it's their conference to lose at this moment.
Oh, there is absolutely no question about that. Arizona is leaps and bounds better than everyone else in the conference. And other than sometimes you're just mid-major conferences where you've got that one very dominant team and everyone else, the difference between number 1 and number 2 is about as vast as we're going to find in all of college basketball. But there is a reason why I did bring up the Washington Huskies, not only because I do think that there's a good chance that they could make the NCAA tournament. I actually like what I'm seeing out of them, but they've got one of the more interesting games that we're going to be seeing on Sunday as well. They're playing out there in the city of Seattle against their city foe in Seattle. This is going to be at Climate Pledge Arena, so a neutral court for these two teams. How do you take a look at Seattle versus Washington? Because with Seattle, they're looking to rise up in the WAC. They've had a couple close calls. I know that they went on the road most recently and lost by 3 against a good San Francisco team. They were close but no cigar against VCU, and they've been knocking at the door, and this is their biggest opportunity for the Redhawks to be able to get a marquee win going into conference play.
Let me tell you this. There is no game of more importance on Seattle U's schedule year in and year out than the game against Washington. It is for city supremacy. They have yet to beat Washington since returning to the D1 level about 17 years ago now. Washington has won it every year. Now, there have been some close calls in recent years. Seattle U circles this game, and this is the biggest non-conference game to them every single year. It doesn't matter if they have a bye game against, Kentucky on the road or whatever. No, if they can beat Washington, that would go a long way towards announcing that this program is back and is something to be reckoned with here in the city of Seattle. Do I think they're going to get it done? I don't know. Washington has had a really good start to the season. Keon Brooks, you're looking at his numbers right now, averaging nearly 20 and 8 a game, 50% from the field, 85% from free throw line, 33% from 3. Those are some eye-popping numbers. He's obviously in play for first team all Pac-12, and who knows, depending on how this season goes, maybe he makes a dark horse case for Pac-12 Player of the Year. He's been just fantastic for UW. Severe Wheeler, former teammate of his at Kentucky, he's been chipping in some really good minutes as well, averaging 16 and nearly 7. And then Moses Wood, the transfer from Portland there, he's been playing really well as well. So I think this Washington team is exceeding my expectations for them early on in this season. They've got a couple of opportunities left before conference play starts at the end of December. You've got Seattle U in a neutral site game and then at home against Eastern Washington. I think those two games, if they can go into conference play, stacking some wins and basically calling themselves the champions of Washington, at least in the non-conference. They've already beat Gonzaga. If they can beat Seattle U and Eastern, then you just have games against Washington State left. I could see them potentially sweeping all the Washington schools, which would be a heck of an accomplishment for Mike Hopkins, especially considering the pressure that he's under.
Oh, there's no question about it. With Mike Hopkins, the seat was about as hot as anyone's in college basketball, though. I will say the seat that Jared has should have been under at Stanford. Should have been so scorching hot that his butt is currently on fire, and yet somehow, some way he has a job. We talk about this every single time you're on the podcast, and both of us have no idea whatsoever how in the world he maintains a job. That guy must have taken some really good pictures. I have no idea how, but
God,
man, that's just absolutely insane.
It is. Look at Stanford right now. Yeah, they got the win over San Diego at the start of December.
Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah, exactly. You got your doors blown off by Northern Iowa. Michigan
nearly lost a season at home.
Yeah, exactly. Michigan is going through it right now. Juwan Howard, is he back? Is he not back? Is he back? Is he not back? Stanford right now is just in a weird spot. We all know what their ceiling can be as a basketball program. Just seeing them over the last, God, it's probably since about like the Lopez twins at this point, they have just not really been all that competitive near the top of the Pac-12. Obviously, they're not going to be in the Pac-12 any longer after this season. They're going to the ACC, which, who knows how long the ACC is going to stick together. But I would say the competition in the ACC is even tougher than the Pac-12. So you're really going to have to look to improve if you're Stanford as you make that trip or as you make that transition to the ACC starting next season, because the program, it's in a bad spot. When indifference among the fan base sets in, and look, Stanford athletics have always had a reputation for not having a very passionate fan base, but you and I remember the Mike Montgomery days, even the early Trent Johnson days. I mean, Maples Pavilion was, one of the toughest places to play out west. And so just to see where it has fallen to now, it's sad to see. It really is. I hope that Stanford's athletic department wakes up and makes a move to inject some life in that program. I mean, heck, you missed out on hiring one of your most proud alums, Mark Madsen. He goes to the arch rival Cal. What a missed opportunity that was. I know Cal's not off to a fantastic start, but nothing gets the alumni base more energized than seeing one of their own come back and man the sidelines. They had that opportunity and let it go by.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, it is just so sad to see Stanford not be able to rise up, because I feel like the coaching is really holding them back. But we shall see what happens the rest of the year for them, as Curtis Rogers, who does great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Curtis, we had a very rambunctious weekend of college basketball already, and on Sunday it is going to be tremendous as well. But I always like to ask you this. I know you do a great job with the West Coast schools, and it could be another West Coast school. It could be a team out east. You've got your pick. Who's a team or two that you're taking a look at right now and you're just warming up on, and you like what you've seen out of them over the last few weeks?
Well, one team that I'm looking at right now that I'm liking a little bit more and more, I think FAU, Florida Atlantic, is a team that is starting to, right the ship a little bit. They've got a big test against Arizona coming up next week. That's going to be a fun one to watch. But another team that I'm looking at right now, let's go in the top 25 here. You look at the Big 12 this season, it is so stacked right now. Baylor obviously took the loss against Michigan State this week, but Houston continuing to win. BYU was one of the last remaining undefeated teams. I'm looking at that BYU team. It's interesting. Their first year out of the West Coast Conference, they took that loss to Utah in Salt Lake City. So it was a close one, and I think Utah really needed that one in a big way. But I look at this BYU team as they enter into Big 12 play here over the next couple of weeks. They got to start against Cincinnati at Baylor is going to be a tough one. Not until the end of January do they have a really tough stretch. Houston and Texas back-to-back games. This BYU team, to me, is one that I'm really intrigued by, especially because you look at what the WCC is right now with Gonzaga kind of stumbling in the non-conference. St. Mary's is taking a step back. I wonder, what would BYU have been this season if they had remained in the WCC? I'm not saying that they're going to have a tough time with it in the Big 12 because they've got, really good scoring. They've got pretty even scoring. I think, 7 guys averaging almost double figures this season. That's pretty impressive, especially, at the collegiate level. So this BYU team, I'm looking at as one that, I think they're playing above expectation. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch in the Big 12. Do I expect them to win the conference? No, but I really like the kind of ball that they play. It should be a fun season in the Big 12 to watch, especially with a deep roster of teams that could probably make a deep run in the NCAA tournament this year. Just going to be a bloodbath in the Big 12 this year.
Yep, it certainly is going to be. You've got so many fun teams. Now, do you want to see Houston challenge themselves a little bit more, but a nice sign that they were able to get a win against Texas A&M. Kansas still has a few question marks with their rotation, but when you've got Hunter Dickinson, when you've got Kevin McCullough, when you've got also throwing out the ball to Juan Harris, you know that this team is going to be rock solid as well. Heck, TCU is a team that has been playing a lot more up-tempo. They look different on offense as well. You just go down the list with West Virginia getting their guys back. Man, it's going to be a lot of fun. And what's always a lot of fun, Curtis, is talking to you on this podcast because you do such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. Take a look at all things out there in the Pacific Northwest. You love this game as much as I do, so let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I had a kid from Kent on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me there, and then seattlesports.com is your one-stop shop for everything. Washington, Seattle U, that's going to be a big one out here. Checking in on Gonzaga every single day. It's a really fun college basketball atmosphere up here in the Northwest. I feel very privileged to be able to cover it, and we do a lot of fun up here in the Northwest just doing that. And it's going to be a very, very fun final Pac-12 season for sure. All these teams just kind of say goodbye after the Pac-12 tournament in March. It's going to be weird, but I'm excited to see what the final year of the Pac-12 brings us.
And how fitting would it be? Because last time the Pac-12 has won a national title was in 1997 when Arizona did it. If in their swan song year they do it. Because we remember when Louisville won their last title, that was a one-and-done year for them out there in the American as well. So that would be absolutely awesome to see. And what's always absolutely awesome is getting Curtis on the show. He does such a great job breaking down this game that we all know and love. So big thanks to Curtis for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. They give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to get Curtis Rogers aboard. Does absolutely amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at everything out there in the Pacific Northwest, doing an amazing job taking a look at this game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he's aboard, he lends amazing insight. So big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_41. We're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving the bigger conferences, the games with 3 digits first, and then the extra games involve teams from smaller conferences. This includes the America East, the Atlantic Sun, the Northeast Conference, the Big South, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Patriot League, and the Southland. So that should keep things neat, clean, and easy. And let's get started with 721, 722 on the betting board. It is Auburn, and they play host to USC. USC is between an 8.5 to a 9-point underdog with a total of 151.5. With Auburn, I did set them as an 8.5-point favorite. Now that we're getting up to a 9, I'm going to be willing to take the points with USC. I don't think that Bronny James is going to make any sort of big impact for USC this year. We saw him in that first game against Long Beach State, a game in which the team lost outright. He was a okay defender for them. He'll be able to come off the bench, give them some points. But if you're banking on Bronny James giving this USC team a big shot of life, I think that you're buying into the name more so than anything else. But it is nice to see him back out there on the floor. The guys that you want to be keying in on, Boogie Ellis, Isaiah Collier. These two guys are combining for about 38.5 points, 7.5 assists, and with Boogie Ellis, he's currently shooting 46% from 3. The big thing for USC, they do need to be cutting down on the turnovers, as in terms of turnovers, they have been turning it over right around 14 times per contest. Meanwhile, have an Auburn team that they're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per game. For Auburn, it's still not an amazing three-point shooting team, but they're a whole heck of a lot better than they were a season ago, shooting about 32.5% from distance, 8.5 away, and his nearly 12 points per game has been a big reason why he and Trey Donaldson about 6.5 assists per game, while only about 2.7 turnovers a game between the two of them. So that's been solid. Down low, you've been able to get a few blocks out of Dylan Cardwell along G&I Broom. Broom is playing a little bit less down low. He's been able to really space out his game a little bit more, and that is a big reason why Auburn, now a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis last year. They were outside of the top 135, but for Auburn, it's not as if they're absolutely gunning it or anything like that. They're about 120th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, which it's not slow, it's not warp speed either. And for USC, they have been able to get a little bit out of DJ Rodman, but I was expecting a little bit more out of them, especially on the offensive side. They're about 98th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Joshua Morgan always does a nice job of being able to block some shots, and that's really the forte of this USC team. They do a very good job of being able to deny you inside. They are going to give up the three-point arc quite a bit, and with Auburn, once again, better three-point shooting team, not an amazing three-point shooting team, though, for a USC team that is right around about 116th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It is a body clock game for USC, 10 o'clock a.m. local time, but I do think that they hold in there at 9 or more. I'm going to be willing to take the points with USC, set my line at an 8.5, and did make my total 148.5, so also diving in on the under 723, 724 on the betting board. From the Stanford Pentagon, it is Syracuse and Oregon doing battle, with Oregon a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. And your total on this game, and between 147 and 148, I did set Oregon as a favorite of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Certainly, you're not going to have any sort of a massive advantage in terms of home court or anything like that, but this is much closer to the West Coast for Oregon, with it being out there in the state of South Dakota. So I do think that plays a little bit of something here for Oregon. Oregon has been dealing with all sorts of injuries, but this is a backcourt that is so rock solid. They get Jackson Shellstead back in the fold. He was a top 75 recruit who actually went to the same high school as Peyton Pritchard out there in Oregon, but this team is still going to be down Nate Biddle. They're still going to be down in Folly Dante, so they're not necessarily an amazing rebounding team, but they've been able to get a little bit more out of Mohamedou Diarra, who comes over from Stetson. He just became an afterthought at Stetson, and I'm not sure why. He's actually been able to do a nice job recently for the Sponge, being able to haul in there about 5.5 rebounds per game, 6+ boards in each of the last 4 games. So he's been able to do a relatively solid job down low for an Oregon team that they're now shooting about 39% from 3. This team has really been able to heat it up from 3-point range, and they go up against a Syracuse team that they're in transition with their defense. They used to go with the zone defense for the longest of times. They're only about 112th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis for Oregon. Not like they've been amazing with their defense, but they're more around 78th with this regard. And for Oregon, it is a team that I think is going to be able to match up well with the Syracuse backcourt. Syracuse is going to have the best scorer in this game in Judah Mintz, who's logging 20 points per game, but Judah Mintz is prone for a few clunkers. We did see that when he had that 5-point performance against Virginia. However, since in the last 2 games, they combined 53 points, but also gets a little bit loose with the ball. He had 4 turnovers in that game against Georgetown as well, so a little bit of caution on that. And then you do have J.J. Starlin, who has been rough with his 3-point shooting at 22%. It's starting to heat back up. I think when it's all said and done, it'll be a low 30s 3-point shooter, 12.5 points, 3 assists for a Syracuse team that they do an okay job of taking care of the ball. And then you've got Malik Brown and Judah Mintz combining for about 4.2 steals per game, so they've done a solid job on that front. It's an okay rebounding team, but you could use a little bit more out of perhaps Naheem McLeod. He just doesn't have the conditioning to be able to stay out there very long, has been able to give you 2 blocks per contest, and that is going to take it out of an Oregon team that once again is a little bit more bare down low, but with the way that Jermaine Cuisinart has been able to run the offense, 12.5 points, 3 assists per contest, going up against a Syracuse team that has been a little bit all over the place with their defense. To their credit, they have now given up 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, but this is also an Oregon team that's been playing a little bit better defense as well. So it is a interesting circumstance. Stanford Pentagon typically is a pretty good shooting environment, so I did set my total at a 148. This actually opened up at a 150, but now that we're down to a 147, I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and with Oregon, want to lay up to 5.5 with them. 725, 726 on the betting board. It is Louisville, and they play us at Pepperdine. The Waves of Pepperdine find themselves as an underdog of 2.5 points. Totals between 145, seeing as high as a 146.5, and it's a spot where I did set Louisville as just a 2-point favorite. So being able to get a 2.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Pepperdine. Don't want Pepperdine outright in this spot because it is a little bit of a body clock game. This is going to be starting up at 11 o'clock a.m. local time, so I do take some caution on that front, but this is a Louisville team that they're just all sorts of dysfunctional. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes with Kenny Payne and the fact that he has no idea how to coach and everything, and it's not great. You do have for this Louisville team Sky Clark, who's been a very solid scorer with about 16.5 points per game, but the team as a whole shooting 27% from 3-point range. You've got one player on the roster shooting above 29% from 3. That'd be J.J. Traynor, and J.J. Traynor has been dealing with a few ailments. He's currently dealing with an injury and probably is not going to be good to go in this game, so they're really going to need to attack down low with Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, who's been able to give the team 9 rebounds per game, and with his Pepperdine squad, you could really use Javon Porter out there, as he was such a nice versatile player. I still have no idea what happened with him, because I thought that he was going to be a nice impact player for the team, and we just haven't seen him thus far this season. So there is that. Babakar Koulibaly, though, he's been able to come back for this team. He was a solid rebounder last year with about 4.5 rebounds per game, and has come back in his first 2 games with a combined 6 blocks. And for Pepperdine, you've got guys that are able to bomb it from 3-point range, and Houston Mallet along with Michael Ajay. These 2 guys have been able to combine for about 35.5 points per game. Ajay has given you 10 rebounds, came up from the non-Division I level, and is currently shooting 55% from 3. Certainly, I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there. Pepperdine has been able to do an okay job of taking care of the ball. This is a more mid-tempo team. Last year, they were playing at a faster tempo. They're turning the ball over about 12.5 times per game, and while the Pepperdine defense still leaves a lot to be desired, it's better than it was a season ago. They're giving up 5 points fewer per 100 possessions. Overall, Pepperdine 192nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Louisville, they look like they were building some nice momentum out there in New York, but they've regressed ever since then. Louisville clocking in right around 188th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You do have Ethan Anderson for his Pepperdine team, who he just has never lived up to his billing after he had a nice freshman year at USC where he doled out north of 4 assists per game. This year, about 7 points, 3.5 assists to 2.6 turnovers per game. You could use a little bit more out of him, but I really just don't like the vibe around Louisville. It's hard to take Pepperdine outright because of the spot itself, with this being an early AM game and everything like that, but getting north of 2, I'm going to be one to ride with points with Pepperdine, and both of these teams are a bit all over the place. Both of these teams, I think, are going to be quite suspect with their defense. I did set my total at 150. I do think that there's a good possibility this is a tight enough game for late game fouling as well, so I'm going to be looking at this total over, and I'm going to be looking at the points with Pepperdine. 727, 728 on the betting board. UTSA, meet for the Road Runners. They hit the road to face off against Oregon State. San Antonio is a 10-point underdog, and your total on this game is anywhere between 146 and 147. But only said Oregon State as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, the one thing that Oregon does have going for them is that the Beavs have the best scorer in this game, as I really do like what I've seen out of Jordan Pope. Jordan Pope is a pretty awesome guy who's been able to notch for the team right around about 16 points per contest. From 3-point range, he's been able to hoist it up at about a 33% clip, shooting 96% at the free throw line. But Oregon State is a mid-tempo team that is committing about 15.8 turnovers per game, and they don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding to their credit, as they have been able to get a little bit more recently out of Michael Rataj. He's been able to log about 6 rebounds per game. You take a look at what he's done in his last two, a combined 21 rebounds at 35 points against Cal Poly along with Utah Valley. So he's been able to rise up a little bit, but with Oregon State, they're a much slower team than what the numbers would show. In terms of total possessions per game, they're in the top half of all of college basketball, but if you dive a little bit further, this Oregon State team has already played 2 games that went to double overtime and a game that went to overtime. So they have played an additional 25 minutes as opposed to most teams. Meanwhile, you've got a UTSA team that has been able to get some relatively good production out of Christian Tucker. Tucker's come in, has been able to give the team 14 points per contest, shot about 40% from 3-point range after the last few seasons. Wasn't necessarily a great 3-point shooter, and it's done a nice job running the offense. 5.7 assists to about 2.3 turnovers per game. This is not an Oregon State team that really pushes the issue and forces a lot of turnovers. Meanwhile, it is a UTSA team that they themselves take care of the ball. About 11.5 turnovers per game. They've been dealing with a little bit of injury with Adante Hulleman. He's their number 2 scorer, has been out of the fold last 2 games, but you certainly have the size to be able to match up down low with Carlton Lingard, a true 7-footer. He's able to give you about 2 blocks, 6.5 rebounds per game, and then Dre Fuller. He's a 6'6" do-it-all player that comes in from Central Florida, 11 points, 7 boards. He's been able to shoot threes, not necessarily at a great clip at right around about 29%, but he's able to give you a little bit of something, and they go up against an Oregon State team that, despite the fact that they really have not played against great competition, they're hovering right around 155th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It is an Oregon State team that's much better defensively at home rather than on the road. When you head to Corvallis, it is a little bit of a strange environment, and this is a UTSA team that, well, they have not been great in terms of their defense, as in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, the Roadrunners 299th in the country, but I just don't think that you've got the guys for Oregon State to really light this team up. It is a UTSA team that they've actually really improved with their offense. They have scored north of 84 points in each of their last 4 games. It is an Oregon State team that has surrendered fewer than 72 points in each of their last 3 games, but again, they played a lot of overtime that has warped a lot of their offensive numbers, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a slog of a game. I did set my total at a 144.5 as a result, diving in on the under end, getting 9+, going to be looking at the points with the Roadrunners, 729, 730 on the betting board. Kansas State plays us in Nebraska. Nebraska is a 5 to a 5.5 point underdog, and your total is 149 to 149.5, and with Kansas State, I could only set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Nebraska. Nebraska has fallen on some tougher times ever since the competition has ramped up a little bit, but this is a Kansas State team that I do have my question marks with. You've got Cam Carter along with Tyler Perry in the backcourt. These 2 guys have done a really nice job of combining for in that neighborhood about 33 points per contest. They're both about 32% 3-point shooters, but it is a Kansas State team that they get loose with the ball with about 14.5 turnovers per game. They just don't have the shooting to be able to offset that, and for Kansas State, this has been a team that has been leaving quite a bit of something to to be desired on defense, 95th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Nebraska, under Fred Hoiberg, those first few years, they were really looking to crank it up tempo and were looking to play very fast. Nebraska up to 73rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This team is playing at very much more of a mid-tempo, and I do think that Rick Baska is actually going to be able to match up with Arthur Kaluma. Kaluma has been a very, very good find for this team. 16.5 points, 8.5 boards, now shooting 39% from three. The biggest knock that I had on him while he was at Creighton was that he wasn't necessarily a great outside shooter. He's really been able to expand upon that, all while giving the team 8+ rebounds per game in each of the last 5 contests. But for Mass, he stands right around 6'10", hasn't shot it amazing from three thus far this season, but coming off of a game against Michigan State where he had 8 points, 6 assists, 14 rebounds. This guy absolutely stuffs the stat sheet. And then you've got Jawan Gary, who's a little bit of a 6'6" jitterbug guy as well. 15 points, 5 boards. He's shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. Nebraska is just a more efficient team right now. They're only turning the ball over 10.5 times per game. Would like to see Casey Shomanaga give you a little bit more than just scoring, but he does do a good job of putting in their 14 points per game. And then you've got nice ancillary pieces like a Josiah Alec, who's able to give you a few rebounds. You've been able to have someone like Adron Coleman, who hasn't seen a ton of minutes, but he's been a nice little defensive stopper for this team. You know that if you need some scoring off the bench, you could potentially go to him if guys get into foul trouble as well. And with Kansas State, I don't feel like you have quite a bit of that safety net as Nequan Tomlin out of the fold. That has been hurting this team quite a bit as well. So it is a situation where I do like Nebraska to be able to hold in there. I did set them as a 3.5 point underdog, and with Kansas State, they're looking to play a little bit more up-tempo with this Nebraska team. They have been looking to slow it down, and I am a believer a little bit in this Nebraska defense as they face off against a Kansas State team that, while they are riding a relatively nice winning streak, 3 of those wins had to come in overtime, and I do feel like they've been cutting it very, very close, and those overtime sessions have really pumped up those Kansas State offensive numbers. So I did set my total at a 145.5. I'm diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points of Nebraska. 731, 732 on the betting board. It is Boise State. They play with Cal State Fullerton, and Fullerton is a 12 to a 12.5 point underdog. Totals between 132.5 and 133, and with Fullerton, I did set them as an underdog of 13.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Fullerton. They lose so much from a season ago. You have been able to get quite a bit of production recently out of Max Jones, who was a relatively solid scorer a season ago, but he's had to turn into Mr. Do-It-All this year with about 17 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists. The transfer from Tampa has been able to do a nice job of time and time again being able to deliver, but we've seen his turnover numbers really ramp up. 6+ turnovers in 2 out of the last 4 games, 3+ turnovers in 3 out of the last 4. Now, they face off against a Boise State team that this is not a team that's going to go out there and get a lot of turnovers, and they themselves are struggling a little bit at the point guard spot. 6'9", Cam Martin has been your main facilitator, has been able to do a nice job with his versatility at 6'9", 7.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, but you would like to have something a little bit more sturdy in terms of being able to dish out the ball. But Chibuzo Egbo, who last year shot north of 40% from 3, well, he's now shooting about 45% from 3-point range. He has logged about 16 points per game for a Boise State team that they continue to be a team that is going to be relatively slow. This is a team that's going to be playing very much under control with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. You'd like to see this Boise State team be a little bit better, but still, they've been able to do a relatively solid job of holding up, especially at home. At home, they're giving up about 18.5 points fewer per 100 possessions rather than on the road. So you do like to be able to back this team when they are in Idaho. And for this Fullerton team, they're another team that they play relatively slowly. They very much have hung their head on defense last few seasons, and they're down to about 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they just don't have a ton of rebounding. Grayson Carper has been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. I just don't know where Vincent Lee is, as he's been in and out of the fold, and when he has been in the fold, he's only been able to give the team 3 rebounds per game. And for Fullerton, they're turning the ball over 14 times per game while shooting 30% from 3-point range. Just highly unacceptable going up against a Boise State team that it does feel like they're finding their sea legs a little bit more on defense. They dealt with a tough schedule to begin the season, but 70 points or fewer surrendered in each of their last 5 games. And with all the difficulty that Fullerton has had on offense, I do think that this becomes a little bit of a low-scoring slog. So this is a total I did set out a 131.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under. And with Boise State, set them as a 13.5 point favorite. So willing to lay up to 13 with Boise, and I'm going to be taking a look at the under. 733, 734 on the betting board. It is North Texas, and they're going to be playing against Mississippi State. Neutral court game that finds Mississippi State as anywhere between a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite, and a total on this game of 126. I set my total at a 121. I'm taking a look at the under. North Texas, even though they've got a little bit of a coaching regime change, It is the same old North Texas, back in the bottom 5 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. And I always say this, with teams that play slow, it doesn't necessarily mean that they play good defense. Well, this North Texas team is one of those teams that they play slow. They give up a low actual point total, and they are very good on defense. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, North Texas, 26th in the country. And if you take a look at North Texas in road/neutral court games, they're giving up 86.3 points per 100 possessions. Only UIC has been giving up fewer points per possessions when they're in a road/neutral court environment, and this is going to be in Tupelo, Mississippi. Hopefully I said that city correctly. So this is going to be in Mississippi State's backyard. And for Mississippi State, all of a sudden, they've exploded with their offense as they put up 191 points in the last 2 games. I do not foresee that lasting. It's a Mississippi State team that's a better three-point shooting team than they were a season ago. That's not saying much, though, considering they were 363rd out of 363 D1 teams a season ago, and there's only 362 Division I teams this year. Josh Hubbard has been the main man for this Mississippi State team. I might be the best overall scorer out there on the floor, 16.5 points on 41.5% three-point shooting, but this team is still missing Tolu Smith down low. They've been able to get some good rebounding with having about 6.5 rebounds per game out of DJ Jeffries, a little bit under that with Cam Matthews. Jimmy Bell Jr. stepped up with 9 points, 9 boards, a little bit over a block per contest, but other than Hubbard, you really don't have anyone else that gets you double figures for Mississippi State. Meanwhile, for North Texas, you do have a few guys there you're able to rely upon for a bucket. Aaron Scott, coupled with Jason Edwards, these guys have been able to do a nice job combining for about 28 points per game, with Scott currently shooting 44% from three-point range in North Texas. While they do an amazing job on defense, they do shoot 37.5% from three. Now, with how slow their tempo is, 12.5 turnovers per game is something that they look to clean up just a little bit, but the buggy man, John Buggs III, he's been able to give this team a little bit more recently as well. 8+ points in 3 of the last 4 games for him. He's shooting 37% from three after coming over from UT San Antonio, and I do think that down low, you're going to have a very good performance out of Mule Sissoko. I still remember in the last 3 games of the NIT last year when they were doing Abdul Usman being away from the team, he had a combined 30 rebounds in those last 3 games. He's been a nice rim protector for the team, right around about 5.5 boards per contest. He's someone that is capable of blocking more shots than what he has thus far this season. I would like to see that be elevated in his game a little bit, but he's been able to do a nice job hauling in there 5+ rebounds in each of the last 4 games. His offensive game seems to be expanding a little bit as well. North Texas is right now just sticking teams into the mud. They've had a lot of close calls recently, but this team has given up now 70 points or fewer in all but one of their games as far this season. That was due to the fact that their game against Northern Iowa went to overtime. Recognize that Mississippi State has been playing a little bit more up-tempo recently, but they're still a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I think that this is a low-scoring slog that North Texas hangs in there on. I set my total 121. Looking at the under could only make Mississippi State a 5-point favorite, so take the points with North Texas to go along with the under. Sub 35, sub 36 on the betting board. It is UTEP, and they third face off against Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian is a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite, and your total is between 139 and 139.5. Set Abilene Christian as a 1.5 point favorite. So right now seeing some ones out there. That's pretty much max I'm going to be willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. This is pretty much, to me, a little bit of a toss-up game. I just lean a little bit to that home court environment, especially with an Abilene Christian team that, even though they're not generating as many turnovers as they have in past years, they do play a little bit of a harebrained style going against a UTEP team that also plays at a very harebrained style. UTEP, one of the top teams in the country in terms of steals forced on a per possession basis. They've been able to get 11.5 per contest, and each of their top 4 scorers have been able to generate at least 1.6 steals per game. They're the only team in all of college basketball that's able to say that. As a result, though, their rebounding does suffer. You've got 2 guys who are able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game. Zid Boom Boom Powell was very versatile out there in the backcourt. 3.5 assists, 11 points per game. He's done a nice job there, though. He has a liability from three-point land, as the entire UTEP team is shooting about 29% from 3. They're back in the bottom 50 with that regard. And then you've been able to have Kevin Kalu be able to chip in their 6 rebounds per game. But this is an Abilene Christian team that, even though they're not generating as many turnovers, they've actually been a little bit more, I guess you call it, well balanced in terms of their defense, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're giving up 3.2 points fewer per 100 possessions this year rather than a season ago. Now, you got with Abilene Christian a little bit of difficulty in terms of rebounding as well. They've only got one guy that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game. That would be their top scorer in Arion Simmons, who's been able to chip in their 14 points, 5.5 boards, shooting about 35.5% from 3-point range. But with Abilene Christian having fewer turnovers forced, they're also committing a couple fewer turnovers per game as well. And this is still an incredibly deep team. With this Abilene Christian bunch, right now they've got pretty much 9 different guys. They're giving you 13 plus minutes per contest. They've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to one of those guys in Leonard Batoil, but he has been able to return for this team, has been able to chip in their 8 plus points in each of the last 3 games. So that's a nice little upgrade for the team. 6'8" combo player that does come over from Italy. Hunter Madden has been able to do a solid job shooting 43% from 3-point range as well. And I do think that just the variance of different looks that you get from Abilene Christian is going to take it out of a UTEP team that might have the best scorer in this game. And Tay Hardy has been able to chip in there 2 steals, 3.5 assists, 15 points per game on north of 40% from 3. But with this UTEP team as a whole, they just can't find a way to put the ball in the basket, and they're turning the ball over about 15 times per contest. It's a UTEP team that has really been struggling with their offense, 63 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. And for this Abilene Christian team, they've had some difficulties with their defense as well. They've now given up at least 78 points in 4 out of their last 5 games. But that said, one of those games went to overtime against Stephen F. Austin, and the offense has been looking a little bit better. So it's a circumstance where I did set my total 137.5. I do think that we're going to see a lot of sloppy basketball. I think that we're going to see a lot of turnovers. So going to be diving in on the under. And with Abilene Christian, want to lay 1 point and not anything more with them. 737, 738 on the betting board. North Dakota State, they hit the road. They're facing off against Illinois State. Illinois State does find themselves as a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. And your total on this game are between 134.5 and 135. And with Illinois State, I did set them as a favorite of 6 points. So being able to lay between 3.5 and 4, I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Illinois State team that certainly been having a little bit of a difficult time finding that go-to score, as Dalton Banks is right now leading the way with about 11.5 points per game, but it is a whole is greater than the sum of its parts team, and they are the better rebounding team in this one. I was hoping to see a little bit more of Andrew Morgan for North Dakota State. He's been able to give about 9.5 points, a little bit over 4 rebounds per game, but it's not really been able to elevate this team down low. He is on a team that doesn't have a single guy that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, although I will say they do a good job of being able to rebound by committee, and you got Damari Thomas Wheeler, who's been able to give you about 3 assists per contest. He's chipping in their double figures, but for Illinois State, having just the bettereth of scoring options is big for this team. You've got someone in Miles Foster who's come in, is not a guy that's going to shoot threes by any stretch of the imagination, but he's been able to do a solid job being able to give you right around about 6 rebounds per game. And then when it comes to Illinois State, you do have a little bit of size down low, as well as you do have Brandon Lieb, who comes in from Illinois. Would like to see him be a little bit more assertive down low, but he stands right around 7'1". He's able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. And then with Dalton Banks being able to chip in there those 3.5 assists, shooting 37% from 3. That's big because you've also got Luke Kazabuke, who comes over from Kansas State, and Johnny Kazinger, who is a true freshman from De Pere, Wisconsin, near where I grew up, combining for about 13 points. They're combining to shoot about 42.5% from 3-point range. And for North Dakota State, they've got a lot of inconsistency in terms of their offense, but they do have a lot of good 3-point shooting. So being able to match up with that is going to be very big, as you've got a pair of guys in Jakari White who are able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range. Along with White, you've also got J. Jarvis Miller. These guys have been able to combine for about 18.5 points per game, and this is in help of Bowden Skunberg, who's really been your top scorer with about 13.5 points per game. But Skunberg has been slowing down recently, 12 points or fewer in each of the last 3 games. Feels like he's taking on a little bit more of a facilitation role, and I know that with North Dakota State, with this coaching staff, they do a lot of experimentation when it comes to the non-conference portion of the season, and for North Dakota State, it does feel like they're doing a little bit more of that. They become a lower tempo team once again this year, outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, I've got an Illinois State team that's really been able to do a solid job with their defense. 72 points of fear surrender in each of their last 4 games. So I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be a slog. I set my total at 134, so here to 134.5, 135. Going to be diving in on the under with Illinois State. I think they win from within. Going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 points with the Redbirds. 739, 740 on the betting board. Stanford is going to be playing against Idaho. Idaho is a 16.5 to a 17.5 point underdog, and your total on this game is between 142.5 and 143.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. I set my total at 149.5. Idaho is not an up-tempo team at all. As a matter of fact, for Idaho, this is one of the slower tempo teams in all of college basketball, but they once again find themselves outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Even though they're clocking in right around about 280th in terms of the total possessions per game. I think that there's going to be plenty of points for a Stanford team that's really cranked up their tempo. Stanford now a top 40 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and not like Stanford's been anything amazing on defense. They're about 158th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got a Stanford bunch that has certainly been able to bomb it from the outside, as you've got Andrei Stojakovic, who has come in as a star-studded freshman, and he's been able to do a nice job giving the team double figures, and 6'7", 6'8". He's been able to shoot about 37% from three-point range. You've been able to have Maximine Reynaud, Brandon Angel, both be able to give you about 14.5 points per game apiece. And what I will say for Stanford is that Jared Bynum has been a really nice find in the transfer portal. An assist-to-turnover ratio of about 3.5, 9.5 points, 7.3 assists. But that Stanford defense has been very costly to them, and they don't have a lot of rebounding, even though they do have a ton of size. Maximine Reynaud, who's saying 7'1", is the only guy on the roster that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. You've got a lot of guys that they do stand north of 6'7", 6'8", that it just feels like they're sort of lazy big men. And it does not help the cause as well that they've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Spencer Jones, who's been out ever since that San Diego game. But I'm still going to be willing to lay it here with Stanford, even though I'm a little bit off put by them because they typically do beat up on lesser competition. And we're going to call it what it is. This Idaho team is lesser competition. Been able to get a little bit of something down low with about 7.5 boards per game out of Julius Mims, who's been able to chip in their 9.5 points per game. It's an Idaho team that they're not terrible with their offense. They turn the ball over 11.5 times per game. They shoot 33% from three-point range. You've been able to have Quinn Dinker be your main scorer with about 12 points per contest, and this team shoots it well at the free throw line, which that's something that can't be said for all schools, but you're expecting a little bit more of Terran Frank. Began his career at Vanderbilt. TCU, he's only been able to give you about 8 points per game. This team has had a little bit of a tough time finding good facilitation, as D'Angelo Minnis seems like he's becoming that main guy. He's been able to give you about 3.5 assists per game, shooting 36% from three-point range, but with Idaho, even though they do enter into this game, having given up 70 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games, much lesser competition. Playing against Cal Poly, Denver, Utah Tech, now they have to step up, play against a Stanford team that they're able to put up points on you. They're going to give up the points, but they are willing to put up points on you, and I think that Stanford going to be able to run it up in a shootout. I did set my line at 19.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Stanford, and did set my total 149.5, so also looking at the over. 741, 742 on the betting board. It is Missouri, and they're going to be playing at Seton Hall. This is a neutral court game, and Seton Hall finds themselves as a slight underdog in the spot of 1.5 to 2 points. Total on this game is 138.5 now. It is technically a neutral court game, but it's out there in the state of Missouri. This is going to be played at the T-Mobile Center, so pretty much a home game for Missouri, and I did set Missouri as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them in the spot, willing to lay up to 2 with them, as the backcourt has been rock solid with Sean East being able to steer the ship. 17 points, 3.5 assists, currently shooting 60% from 3, and Missouri as a whole, they're shooting 35% from 3. I think that the whole shooting 35% from 3, that's sustainable. Sean East, I don't think that his number is quite sustainable, and even though Missouri is forcing a couple fewer turnovers than a season ago, they're still doing a solid job. But the reason why I'm going to be willing to back Missouri in the spot is that they're now starting to give Connor Vanover more minutes, and I felt like this was a missing link for this team because he was so good while he was over at Oral Roberts a season ago at 7'5". He's such a good rim protector. Was suspended towards the beginning part of the season, but now it's given this team right around 17, 18 minutes per game, and I do think that that's going to affect a Seton Hall team that they just don't have a ton down low. They did lose a lot of their main rebounders from a season ago. Jaden Bediako comes in from Santa Clara, has been solid with about 10 points, 8 rebounds, block and a half per contest, but I don't think that he matches up the world's greatest with Vanover, and I do think that Seton Hall is going to see an uptick with their three-point shooting. They're shooting 29% from distance. Dre Davis, Elamir Dawes last season both shot north of 40% from 3. Right now, they're combined shoot about 31% from the outside with their about 12 points per game apiece. Kadari Richmond, I mean, he's done a nice job himself in the stat sheet. 4.5 assists, 6 rebounds, 15 points, 2 steals per game. He's only shooting 13% from 3. You expect much more there, and then they've been dealing with a little bit of an injury. Seton Hall has with Elijah Hutchins Everett being out of the fold, but now they're getting him back, and that should be able to give them a little bit more rebounding as well. But with Missouri having so many options, like a Nick Honor, who's been able to give you about 12 points per contest. Noah Carter has been able to chip in there, 6 rebounds per game. Caleb Grill, not only he's dealt with a little bit of an injury, but he's been able to do a nice job on the defensive side of things as well. I do think that it's a little bit too much Missouri in a spot where Seton Hall is pretty much playing a road game, and for Seton Hall, the offense has been a big liability for this team. They have scored 70 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. 72 2 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5, with the 72 coming up against an Iowa team that doesn't play any defense whatsoever. Meanwhile, for Missouri, it has been against lesser competition, sans the games against Wichita State and to a lesser extent the game against Pittsburgh, but they've been able to find themselves as well, and the defense has been able to hold up, giving up 73 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. So this is a spot where I'm going to be willing to back Missouri, set them as a 2.5 point favorite, and did set my total at 140.5. Missouri, we recall last year the way that they wanted to run, and I do think that they're going to be cranking up the tempo just a little bit more. So going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Missouri. 743, 744 on the betting board. It is Oklahoma State. They play us at Oral Roberts, and Oral Roberts does find themselves as a 7.5 to an 8-point underdog, and your total on this game is between 141.5 and 142.5, and with Oral Roberts, I did set them as a underdog of 8.5 points. So at the 8, it's a max I'm willing to lay with Oklahoma State, but I am going to be willing to lay it with Oklahoma State. With Oral Roberts, they've actually really cranked down their tempo. They are now outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, and it's not as if the defense has really been shaping up as well. 312th in the country is Oral Roberts in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got an Oklahoma State team as 53rd, though. For Oklahoma State, I will say, this team has actually been less effective with their defense when they've been at home rather than when they have been on the road, giving up about 2.3 points more per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than when they are on the road. But for Oklahoma State, I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job of excelling with their offense, with having Jamal Small be just an absolutely tremendous player. With Small, 17 points, 5 assists, 5 boards, steal per contest, 42% 3-point shooter. They have been missing a few pieces along the way throughout the season, but now you've got Bryce Thompson back, who last season was really your main 3-point shooter with about 12 points on 37% from outside. Now, ever since he has returned, hasn't necessarily been himself. In the last 4 games he's actually played in, has scored fewer than 10 points, but I do think that he's going to be able to find it a little bit more, and they go up against an Oral Roberts team that can't take advantage of the fact that Oklahoma State really doesn't have that one dominant rebounder, Keon Williams, with the 6.2 rebounds per game right now leading the way, but Oral Roberts just missing a lot of general size, as they were getting a little bit of something out of Pablo Navarro in their last game against a non-D1 team. He was able to log 9 rebounds per game. We'll see if he actually gets minutes or if that was just a little bit of a flash in the pan. Meanwhile, it's been up to Isaac McBride along with Jalen Bedford to really engineer the offense. These two guys have been able to give you combined about 33 points per game, and Bedford is shooting 45% from 3, and as a whole, Oral Roberts only turned the ball over about 8.7 times per game. They're shooting 37.5% from 3-point range, so they've done a nice job executing on that front. Oral Roberts has gone to at least 76 points in each of their last 4 games, but defense has been quite unsightly in their games against Division I competition. They have allowed at least 70 points in all of them, except for the win that they had against Texas Southern, and Texas Southern is one of the most brutal offenses in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got an Oklahoma State team that they're always looking to play tough defense. They have given up 70 points or fewer pretty much all but 2 of their games thus far this season, with one of those exceptions being that game that they did play against Creighton. So you've got a situation of something's got to give, and I do think that the defense is going to win out in the spot, which is why I did set Oklahoma State as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with them, and in terms of the total, I did set mine at a 144.5. I do think that you're going to be in a strike zone for a little bit of late game falling, and I do think that Oklahoma State is going to be able to exploit an Oral Roberts team that is right now outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So going to be going on the over, and I'm going to be taking a look at Oklahoma State laying the number. 745, 746 on the betting board. It is San Jose State, and they're going to be playing against Montana, and Montana does find themselves as a underdog of 3 to 3.5 points. Your total on this game are between 137 and 137.5. Did set San Jose State as a 3.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 here. This is actually a rematch of a game that we saw a few weeks ago, and in that affair, we saw San Jose State taken on the chin by kind of 75 to 58, and for San Jose State, they have been trying to do a little bit of mixing and matching because one of the main big men that they were expecting to have this year, Robert Viola, has been out of the fold, but they have been able to have 4 out of their top 5 scorers be able to give you at least 4.5 rebounds per game. You've certainly been able to have Tebek Groner along with Trey Anderson contribute down low with about 5.5 rebounds per game apiece. Both of these guys give you about 13 points per game, but it's been all about the facilitation with 5.5 assists per game. You've gotten out of Alvarado Cardenas. Cardenas has done a nice job making things very efficient for San Jose State. A San Jose State defense said they typically don't give up these sorts of numbers. They're a top 50 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That night, Montana, they were able to go 8 of 22 from 3-point range. Meanwhile, for San Jose State, sloppiness in general did take over. They lost the turnover battle by a count of 16 to 11, and I expect things to be a little bit different here. You do have a Montana team that certainly does a nice job taking care of the rock themselves. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, with Aiden Moody being your top scorer with about 15 points per game. But Money Williams, yes, that is an actual name. He has been money for the team, as he himself is chipping in there right around about 15 points per game. Neither of these guys shooting a ball from three, but I remember Moody a season ago was a high 30s, low 40s three-point shooter, so I do expect that to be able to rebound a little bit. But with this Montana team, really the one guy that's been able to do a solid job on the glass has been Lalu Oke, who's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. I do think that this time around, San Jose State going to do a better job of taking care of the ball against the Montana team that year in and year out, they don't necessarily force a lot of turnovers. You've seen this Montana team be able to rise up a little bit more with their offense, but a lot of it has been against lesser competition. And for San Jose State, the defensive numbers have gone up a little bit because they have given up north of 74 points in each of their last 4 games. But a lot of that is because 2 of these games did go to overtime. They also play against New Orleans, who's a very, very up-tempo team. So I do think that with San Jose State, they are going to be able to get back to basics here. Did set my total at a 135.5. I do think that we're going to get a similar tempo game to what we saw the first time around. So at the 137.5, going to be diving in on the under. And I do think that we get a nice revenge spot here with San Jose State. One to lay up to 3 with them to go along with this total under. 747, 748 on the betting board. It is Seattle and Washington doing battle from the city of Seattle as the Red Hawks find themselves as 4 to 4.5 point underdogs. So this game is anywhere between 148.5 and 149. And we did hear our good friend Curtis Rogers talk about it. This is just such a massive game for Seattle, but this is a massive game for Washington as well. I mean, we laid out the fact that Mike Hopkins needs every single win that he can get for job security, and I do think that for Washington, they are going to be able to outclass Seattle in this ordeal. I did set Washington as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it as Washington has really underwent a little bit of a facelift in the way that they are operating. They're in the top 40 nationally in terms of total possessions per game. For Washington, it's been Keon Brooks who's really been the headline scorer for this team, as he's been able to do a nice job logging 20 points per game. He's got Xavier Wheeler, who played with him at Kentucky, doling out the ball as he's been able to give out about 6.5 assists per game, though. He's a high variance player, 3.8 turnovers per contest. That's been a little bit unsightly for a Washington team that they themselves don't necessarily force a bunch of turnovers on the defensive side of things, but you do take a look at this Washington team right around about 80th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against a Seattle team that typically with regards to their offense, it's Cam Tyson, not a whole lot flat else. He's gotten a little bit more help, and once again, this is a Seattle team that has done a nice job of excelling on that side of the ball. 35th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Tyson thus far this season has seen a little bit of drop from the 20 plus points per game that he's been logging the last few years, as he's now been able to give you in the neighborhood about 17.5 points per contest, but is still shooting about 40% from 3-point range. He's had some help though, as you've had Alex Shoemaker along with Brandon Chatfield both be able to give between about 11 to 12.5 points per game. Chatfield 5.5 boards, a guy with size that's able to pop threes, so doesn't necessarily shoot them the world's greatest. Kobe Williamson has been able to log about 5.5 rebounds per game down low as well, but for the Seattle team, it's a little bit of a top-heavy team that's now getting a little bit more depth back in. Paris Dawson was dealing with an injury towards the beginning part of the season. He missed a few games. He's back. He's only been able to give you about 5.5 points, 4 boards. So if you're able to get him going, that's going to be instrumental against a Washington team that has a guy that does it all. And Paul Mulcahy comes over from Rutgers. He's done a nice job with about 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. Fronting Kepadog, you know that he's going to be able to do a solid job down low, 2 blocks, 6 rebounds per game. And because he's been so solid, they haven't looked to Braxton Maya, their 7-footer, quite as much. But I do look at Nate Kalmezi as perhaps being a little bit of an upside guy when they're able to get him back, as I know that he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury since the beginning of the month of December. May or may not be able to play in this game. I'm sort of counting on him being out once again, but if he is out, probably going to see a little bit more Moses Wood, who does space out the floor. I do think that is going to cause life to be a little bit difficult on a Seattle team that they've got versatile guys, but guys with a little bit less just ability in general, as opposed to this Washington team. So this is an ordeal where I did set Washington as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. In terms of the total, set mine at a 145. I do think that the Seattle defense is going to be able to come out, but I do think that Washington going to be able to do a nice job of winning the battle on the glass. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under and going to be willing to lay it with Washington. This is my DK Network right at pick in the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game, 749, 750. It is Nevada on the road against Hawaii. The Rainbow Warriors find themselves as 3-point home underdogs. So on this game is 143, and my right up here is going to be on the Rainbow Warriors. I like them outright on the money line. At the time that this is released, it's probably going to be a situation where I just have to give out like +3, +2.5, whatever the number is, just because typically money lines points are not available at the time of post. But that said, with this Hawaii team, I really like the way that they've been able to play defense the last 2 seasons. They've flipped up a little bit since last year. Last year, they were a top 35 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're more around 65th this season. And Nevada, they certainly have been supreme with their defense. Nevada, a top 20 team in the country entering into Saturday in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But Nevada has not had to hit the road like a lot, and that is a little bit of a fear that you have to have if you're going to be willing to back Nevada, because with the Wolfpack, they are giving up right around 14.5 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. And it's a Nevada team that they give up most of their points from beyond the 3-point arc. This team is in the bottom 15 nationally in terms of opponents' points that come from 3-point range, as they're allowing 39.2% of opponents' points to come from made threes. Guess what the forte is for the Rainbow Warriors? Shooting it from 3-point range. They're shooting it at a clip of 39.3%. While on defense, they only allow opponents to get about 21.1% of their points from 3-point range. So Hawaii is going to be looking to the perimeter to be able to win this game, and I do think that they're going to be able to do so also well, as you've got Justin McCoy. He comes in after being a top 200 recruit over at Virginia along with North Carolina, and he's been able to elevate this team. Noah Coleman alongside of him has been able to give you about 17 points per contest, shooting 44% from 3 with 1.3 steals per game. McCoy right around 7 boards, 11.5 points per contest, shooting about 42.5% from the outside. And as a matter of fact, for this Hawaii team, out of your top 4 scorers have made at least 1 3 this far this season, as Bernardo da Silva, just more of a true low post player with about 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. They're all shooting at least 40% from 3. Should we see a little bit of regression with that? Probably, but we've also got Mo Sek down low, who's able to give you a block per contest. He's able to be a rock-solid big man, and one that Nevada I don't think is going to be able to do the world's greatest job with, as, for Nevada, they do a nice job of rebounding by committee. Keenan Blackshear, along with Noah Davidson, they've been able to combine for about 12 rebounds per game. And for Blackshear, he's a very versatile guy. At 6'6", gives you 16 points, 6 boards, 4.5 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest. And then Jared Lucas, just that ultimate scorer that also does a good job of playing both man-to-man and zone defense. He's very versatile in that way. 16 points, shoots 36.5% from 3-point. But then from there, it's just all about having guys like Hunter McIntosh give you 6 points. Trey Coleman will give you like 7.5 points. A little bit of facilitation. It's a bunch of just pieces that contribute to the greater good. But I do think that with having to travel to Hawaii, that is going to take a lot of this Nevada team. We have seen Nevada when they've had to hit the road in recent years. Things do get a little bit haywire with them. It's a Nevada team that does a nice job of not turning the ball over, and that's a little bit of a bugaboo that you do have with Hawaii. But Nevada doesn't force turnovers as well, which I think is going to be able to allow Hawaii to control this game and be able to get the job done outright. So my DK Network write-up pick is going to be on Hawaii. Like I said, probably will have to give out +3 if money lines are not available, but on Hawaii regardless, and did so my total 137. Hawaii's been playing a little bit more up-tempo this season, but both of these teams playing very sound defense. So looking at the under and my write-up, that is going to be on the Rainbow Warriors. Now we get the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-571, 306-572. It is Illinois playing against Colgate. Colgate finds themselves as underdogs of 15.5 to 16 points. Your total on this game is staying between 145 and 145.5. Colgate, each of the last 3 seasons, was a team that was shooting north of 39% from 3-point range. That's taking a bit of a fall off. They're now shooting more in the mid-30s from 3-point range, so I do think that the scoring is going to be a little bit more muted in this game, going up against an Illinois team that fully recognized that they had that clunker against Tennessee, but this is still one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball. In terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis for Illinois, they're clocking in 10th, and they go up against a Colgate team that has been playing outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Colgate, to their credit, not a bad defense, right around about 113th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, but I just don't think that they're going to match up very well with an Illinois team that, for one, has a very dominant scorer in TJ Shannon, 21.5 points, 4 boards, shooting 42.5% from 3-point range, but on top of that, you've got such good team rebounding with this Illinois team. Each out of your top 7 scorers are packing in there at least 4 rebounds per contest. You've got a lot of interchangeable pieces in terms of doling out the ball, as well as Coleman Hawkins has done a great job of just being a 6'10" do-it-all player, 7 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists per game. Like to see him be able to shoot those threes a little bit better, but that's going to be really tough for Colgate to match up with. Colgate does have someone that is very versatile in his own right, in Braden Smith, who's been able to give you 15 points, 5.5 assists, 5.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and Colgate's starting to rise up once again with their 3-point shooting, but I think that they're going to have all sorts of issues in one of the biggest step-up games that they're going to see, and you've been able to have Ryan Moffitt be able to chip in there for Colgate, 40% three-point shooting, about 10 points per game, and now Keegan Records is starting to pop some threes as well. He's been able to give you about 7 boards, 7.5 points per game, so do like what I'm seeing there, but it is an Illinois team that also being able to have someone like a Dane Danger do a solid job down low, Quincy Guerrier be able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. I think that Colgate just going to have it taken to them in terms of athleticism, and after Illinois gave up north of 80 points in each of the last 2 games after they were looking like one of the most dominant defensive machines in all of college basketball, I think that Colgate are going to have a little bit of a tough time matching up for that, and we have seen in the step-up games for Colgate like they had against Arizona, they just have not been able to stay out there on the floor. So this is a spot where I did set my total 139.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under, and with Illinois, willing to lay up to 17 points with them. 306-573, 306-574. Stony Brook gets the road face-off against Army. Army finds themselves as underdogs of 3.5 points. Total on this game is 133.5, and I did set my total at 132.5. So 133 or higher, I'm going to be looking at the under. This is actually an opener that was a 129. So we have seen a rise up with this total, and I'm not quite sure why. As this Army team has really not been able to put the ball in the basket. Army as a whole thus far this season, they're averaging about 60.5 points per game in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Army as well outside the top 300 with that regard. As from 3-point range, they're honestly not the world's worst team, but you'd like to see better than 29.2% 3-point shooting. They have been able to get in the neighborhood about 10 points per contest, mid-30s 3-point shooting as well out of Ryan Curry, who's been able to step up with 2.5 assists per contest. But really, other than Charlie Peterson, this is a new look team from seasons ago, and Peterson is not necessarily too much of a scorer. Great name, 5.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. He's been able to give you a relatively solid effort, but you just have had a lot of interchangeable pieces because it feels like even Army doesn't necessarily know what they have on offense, and they're going up against a Stony Brook team that they've got some good versatility. As you've got a guy in Keenan Fitzmaurice who stands right around 7 feet tall. He's able to pop threes, doesn't necessarily shoot them very well, but has been able to log for the team about 10 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Your main rebounder actually comes in from Fairfield and Charles Mado, who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. And Tyler Stevenson Moore should see a little bit of regression from his 49% 3-point shooting, but he has been incredible in leading the way for this offense, 16.5 points per game. You've had Aaron Clark be a little bit in and out of the fold as he's been missing for 4 games, and he's probably going to be out of the fold once again for this team. But Dean Knoll, who missed all of last season due to injury, comes over from Cornell, has been able to elevate this offense as well with a pair of steals, 10.5 points per game going up against an Army team that they really don't do a great job of being able to generate turnovers themselves. And for Army, they're also a little bit of a rough team with regards to their defense as well in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Got an Army bunch that's clocking in right around 145th, and it's actually giving up about 1.5 more per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than on the road. I do think that Stony Brook is going to be able to do a good job with their size, and with just not having anything in the backcourt for this Army team, I think it makes it very difficult for them to hold in this game. I did set my total at 132.5. I'm diving in on the under, and with Stony Brook, willing to lay up to 4 points with them. 306-575, 306-576. It is VMI, and they hit the road face-off against Longwood. Longwood finds themselves as 17.5 point favorites. Totals between 141 and 141.5. Did set my line at a 16, so here at 17 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points. With VMI, I actually do think that this team has a couple of solid, sturdy pieces. Now, this is not a VMI team that is necessarily going to be able to elevate and just do an amazing job this year or anything like that, but for Longwood, because they're not necessarily the world's greatest 3-point shooting team, I do think that it's going to be tough for them to win by margin a whole heck of a lot. As for Longwood, Waylon Napper has been able to do a very solid job at the point guard spot. He gives you 14.5 points, 4.8 assists per game, so he's been a liability with his 3-point shooting. He's shooting right around about 17.5% from 3 this year. Now, he's got some help from his friends. Overall, for this Longwood team, they're shooting 35% from 3-point range. It's more of the ancillary pieces. They're good 3-point shooters, like D.A. Houston has been able to give you about 7 points per game. He shoots north of 40% from 3. Jesper Granlund, he's been able to give you about 6 points. He shoots north of 40% from 3. But Longwood, also a very good rebounding team, as you've got in the fold Simon Zapala. He was over at Utah, true 7-footer from the Aggies of Utah State. 10.5 points, 6 boards per contest. Jonathan Massey, Michael Christmas have been able to combine for in that neighborhood about 13.5 rebounds per game. Both give you double figures. And for VMI, that's going to be tough to match up with, but they do have Tashad Jackson, who's been able to do a nice job with his 10.5 rebounds per game. That's how you really don't have a whole heck of a lot of rebounding on the team. But VMI shoots about 33.5% from 3-point range. Their biggest issue has been the turnovers. They have turned the ball over right around about 15.5 times per game, and it is a Longwood team that they've been one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball. Forget mid-major, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it's a Longwood team that's 22nd in the country in terms of points allowed per possession, and for VMI. They always are a rough team with their defense. They're up to 254th in the country this year, which doesn't sound great, but they are actually giving up 8.5 points fewer per 100 possessions this year rather than a season ago. So I do think that this line is a little bit inflated. I do think that this is going to be a game that is going to be involving VMI knocking down a few shots, and I do think that Longwood going to be able to warm up a little bit as well, as we have seen this Longwood offense output up 80 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. But I do think that VMI hits just enough shots to be able to remain lively in this game. So did set my total 144, looking at the over, and with Longwood, was only willing to lay up to 16 points with them, so getting 17 plus, going to be looking at VMI. 306.577, 306.578. It is Fairfield, and they play us a Wagner. Wagner finds themselves as an underdog of 6 to 6.5 points, totals between 131.5 and 132, and with Wagner, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to take those points with Wagner. We have seen a pretty dramatic fall off with their defense. For Wagner, last few seasons, this has always been a team that has been a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're now clocking in outside the top 125, but they do have a guy in Melvin Council that I do think is going to be able to keep them in this game. Melvin Council, 13 points, 4 boards, not a great 3-point shooter for a team that's only shooting about 35.5% from the floor, 30% from distance, so you do want to see that be a little bit elevated, but they have been able to get a little bit of facilitation as Council has been able to give you north of 2 assists per game, or me or more. It does a solid job of being able to dish out the ball as well. With him out of the fold, though, you've had to see other guys be able to rise up and take on that role, and we have seen Javier Esquera be that guy. Javier Esquera has been able to give you about 3 assists per contest, 3 plus assists in 4 of the last 5 games, and he hasn't scored a single point in any of the last 2 games, but it hasn't hurt the defense, and the flow of the offense has still been relatively okay, as he's been able to do a nice job of just being able to find guys in space and be able to get them the ball, as you've been able to get more around about 9.5 to 10 points per game out of Zaire Williams, with Williams 11 plus points per game in each out of the last 4, so he's been able to elevate with that regard. And you've got a Fairfield team that they're just disjointed in general, because they do have their coach in Jay Young get canned just weeks before the start of the season. They have yet to have their star transfer and Alexis Yetna to take the floor as well. They just got back their big man in Brima Sek, but he was limited only about like 10 or so minutes in his first action of the season, so you don't have a lot of size here. You've got a few guys that have been able to give you a few rebounds, as you've got about 5.5 rebounds per game out of Lewis Bleachmore for a Fairfield team that is shooting about 34% from 3-point range, and credit to this man being able to generate about 2.8 steals per game in Jasper Floyd, 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, 4.5 assists per contest. But with Fairfield, they've had to undertake a completely new style. Typically, this would be a very slow, very controlled team outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Now they're in the top half of all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and it hasn't necessarily reflected into great offensive production. 237th in the country for Fairfield in terms of total points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, they're 245th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's been rough for this Wagner team. There's no question about it. For Wagner, in terms of their overall scoring, they have scored 64 points or fewer in each of the last 4 games, but not like this Fairfield team has necessarily been much to write home about as well. Fairfield does come in on a 3-game win streak, but I do think that Wagner is going to get back to their hard-nosed defensive roots to be able to hold in this game, so I set Fairfield as just a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Wagner. Wagner playing at one of the slowest paces in all of college basketball, and Fairfield, with all the guys on the roster, having played a little bit of a different style, I think that they're going to be comfortable playing slower as well. Semi-total 128 to have it in on the under, and going to be looking at the points with Wagner. 306.579, 306.580. Northern Iowa's playing us Alcorn State, and Alcorn State is a 17 to a 17.5 point underdog with your total between 152 and 152.5. I did set my total at 142.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. Now with Alcorn State, this has been a very brutal defense. They are currently in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but has also been having a tough time putting the ball in the basket on offense, as they're outside the top 320 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. It's an Alcorn State team that they don't turn the ball over a lot. They turn it over right around 12 times per contest. You've been able to have Jeremiah Kendall lead the way with 15 points, 7 boards per contest, but he is the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 3.8 rebounds per game. And with Northern Iowa, for some reason, this team just has not been able to play defense. 281st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that they finally got the message going up against Prairie View, giving up just 55 points in that one. And if you look at the schedule that Northern Iowa had to begin the season, they played against Belmont, they played against North Carolina, Texas Tech, Stanford. They really had to challenge themselves, so I do think that the defense is going to be able to improve as the season goes along. This is still not necessarily a super up-tempo team. You've got Titan Anderson, who's been able to give you about 7 boards, 11.5 points per game. down low, I would like to see a little bit more out of Jacob Hudson. He's a 6'11" big man that's only been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, but the big key for this team is that Bowenborn looks like he is back. He must have been dealing with an injury or something to begin the season, but in the last 4 games, has been able to log 13 plus points per contest. After last season, he was really their main scorer, and it's a Northern Iowa team that's now shooting about 36% from three-point range, so they've been very solid from the outside. You could use a little bit more out of Michael Duex, who was able to give you about 9 points, 5 boards per contest a season ago. This year, he's only giving you about 4.5 points per game, but you can tell that with Alcorn State losing Dominic Bruton from a season ago, it's caused for them to not be able to generate as many turnovers. The overall offensive efficiency from three-point range has actually not been too bad, but when they try to punch a ball inside the arc, they just have not had a lot of success with that. And it is an Alcorn State team that they're playing a little bit more brisk. It's not like they're playing at warp speed, though, about 115th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that Northern Iowa has gotten it through their heads that they need to play a little bit more defense. I think that we saw them flip that switch against Prairie View, and I think that they're going to go out there and duplicate that against an Alcorn State team that they just can't score the ball from inside the arc. I did set my line at an 18.5, willing to lay 17.5 with Northern Iowa, and did set my total at 142.5, so also going to be going in on this total under 306.581, 306.582. Omaha is going to be playing us as Seton. This is a pick'em game with the total at a 143.5 with Seton. I did set them as a 2-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to ride with Omaha. It's a Nebraska-Omaha team that certainly has had their warts on defense. They are consistently outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do like the star players for this Omaha team, as you've got Frankie Fiddler, your main scorer, who's done a nice job logging 15 points, 5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, and then you've been able to get a little bit of facilitation over the last few seasons out of J.J. White, though he's taken a little bit of backseat on that this year, about 6 points, 2 assists. Last year, he's given out more like 4 assists per contest, but a little bit more team rebounding for Omaha as well. Each of your top 3 scorers giving you at least 4.8 rebounds per game, and for Omaha, they've done a good job taking care of the ball. 11.8 turnovers per game. It's a coaching regime that has really valued trying to slow things down. Omaha now 287th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You got a Stetson team that they are not looking to push tempo as well. This is a Stetson squad that even last year, they were in the bottom 75 in terms of total possessions per game. They're currently 344th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. At Stetson, not shooting it quite the same from 3 as they did a season ago. Last year, this team shot well north of 38% from 3, and I mean, they're still solid, 36.2% from 3. Nothing to sneeze at, but I do think we're going to see some regression from Jalen Blackman, who last year shot 34% from 3 with 15.5 points per game, shooting 47% this year with 21.5 points per game. That just doesn't seem sustainable to me. It is a Stetson team that, much like last year, they have been gross with their defense. They're 37th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I will say, of their top 5 scorers, 4 of them have been able to haul in there at least 4.5 rebounds per game, like what I've seen out of Alec Oglesby, the transfer from UNC Wilmington. Shoots about 35% from 3 at 6'5", gives you about 5 boards per contest, but really the only guy that's been able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game is Aben Gasterse, who's been able to chip in there about 7.5 rebounds per game, with Markel Sutton really being your main man down low for Omaha. That's not going to be too exposed for them, because a lot of the fear that you do have is that they're going to get dominated on the glass. And for this Omaha team, defense has been a little bit better recently, giving up 70 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. Those were all against non-Division I teams, and both of these teams have really been able to elevate their numbers against non-Division I competition, and then against D1 teams, they just really don't produce. So it makes it a little bit tricky in this spot, but I do lean a little bit more to the home team in Omaha. I do think that with Omaha and the backcourt just being able to take relatively solid care of the ball and seeing a little bit of regression coming for Stetson, I do think that they're going to be able to get it done. Did set my total at a 140. It's going to be a really low possession game, so we're going to have the under and looking at Omaha on this pick'em line, as I did set Omaha as a 2-point favorite. 306.583, 306.584. McNeese is going to be playing us with Louisiana. Louisiana is a 6.5 to a 7-point underdog, and your total is between 141 and 141.5. And with McNeese, I did set them as a 3.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Louisiana. McNeese does have some reinforcements coming in with some of those 2-time transfers that were barred from playing at the beginning part of the season, but I do think that Louisiana is efficient enough to be able to hold in there, and for Louisiana, they're going to have the best scorer in this game, and Kobe Julian to be able to do a nice job with 20 points per game on 45.5% three-point shooting, and Louisiana, top 50 team in the country with their three-point shooting about 38% from the outside, and you've got a McNeese team that has been very controlled with regards to their offense. They're in the bottom 30 in terms of total possession possessions per game, but they're a top 5 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. McNeese playing much better defense than they have in the past. Will Wade has gotten this team in the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For McNeese, they probably are going to hang a banner for that because they were so bad with their defense last few seasons. But with this Louisiana team, even though they are right around 240th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they still do a solid job down low because you do have Joe Charles giving you a block, 11.5 points, right around 8.5 rebounds per game, and you've also had Thamus Folks do a really nice job dishing out 5 assists while shooting north of 40% from three-point range. With Folks, he has been a little bit in and out of the fold, but has returned in the last 2 games and has been highly efficient since his return. 15 assists to 6 turnovers in the last 3 games, and with McNeese, you do have Shad Wells, who you know is going to be able to put the ball in the basket. It's giving you about 18.5 points per game, and you've been able to have Christian Schulmade, one of the main holdovers from a season ago, logged 12.5 points, 10 boards per game for a McNeese team that has only turned the ball over 9 times per game. They shoot about 38.5% from three-point range, but I do think that with the overall size and versatility of Louisiana, they're going to be able to hold in there against a pair of teams that are 2 of the better Southern mid-majors, in my opinion, in all of college basketball. And you've got a McNeese team that is going to have to go up against a Louisiana team that has been playing much better with their defense, giving up 72 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games. Lone exception was against Stanford, and we know what they're doing right now. Meanwhile, it's a McNeese team that they themselves have given up 71 points or fewer in pretty much all but 2 of their games thus far this season. So I do foresee this being a little bit of a lower scoring game. Did set my total 137.5, diving in on the under end. Set Louisiana as a 3.5 point dog, so looking at the points, 306.585, 306.586. Eastern Kentucky plays us to Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky, an underdog of 2 to 2.5 points. Total is 142 to 142.5. Set Eastern Kentucky as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Northern Kentucky. I like the duo that they have in the backcourt. You've got your main scorer, Marquise Warwick, who's done a nice job packing in there 19.5 points per game. Shooting now about 33% from 3. Last year, that was closer to 38% from the outside, but all in all, has done a nice job on that front. And then Sam Vincent does a really good job for a Northern Kentucky team that is one of the best in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. This is a Northern Kentucky team that they always play relatively slowly, and yet they're generating about 9.8 steals per game. As a matter of fact, in terms of total possessions per game, it's a Northern Kentucky team that is right now clocking in right around about 249th in the country. Meanwhile, Eastern Kentucky, just year in and year out, this is a team that wants to crank up the tempo. They're more around 65th in the country with this regard, and Eastern Kentucky, they've done a nice job in terms of generating steals as well. They match at 9.6 steals per game that Northern Kentucky has been able to generate, and they've got more down low. With Northern Kentucky, last year you had Chris Brandon, who was able to log 9 rebounds per game. He's gone, and they haven't found that replacement. Meanwhile, for Eastern Kentucky, out of your top 5 scorers, 3 of them have been able to give you at least 6 rebounds per game, and this includes Isaiah Cozart. Cozart, 15 points, 9.5 boards, 5.4 blocks per game. Yeah, that leads all of college basketball, and that leads all of college basketball by a country mile. Against Troy, he literally had a triple-double with blocks. That's how good he is down low, and it is a Northern Kentucky team that, they've been having a little bit of struggle from three-point range, shooting about 30.5% from the outside. They're turning the ball over 12.5 times per game, which means they're going to have to look a little bit more inside, and Eastern Kentucky going to be able to do a good job holding up on that front. With Cozart, he also gives you 15 points per game. You've been able to have Devontae Blankenship in there, 16.5 points per game, and I do think that Michael Moreno is going to be able to get into the act of scoring a little bit more as well. It's logged at least 7 points per game each out of the last 3 years, only about 8 points per contest, but with Eastern Kentucky, the way that they guard inside, I think that that's going to be enough for them to be able to get it done against a Northern Kentucky team that I do think that they're going to be able to generate their turnovers as well, but I do think that this total is just a little bit too low. I did set my total at a 143, so here at 142, 142.5, going to be taking a look at the over, and with Eastern Kentucky, wanting to lay up to 2.5 with them. 306.587, 306.588. Iowa State is playing us to Florida A&M. Florida A&M is a 32.5 to a 33-point underdog. Totals between 134.5 and 135. This is a back-to-back for Florida A&M, and they got crushed against Iowa. I think this number has went a little bit too far. As this opened up at a 28.5, I set mine at a 31. On the opener, I could have advised a play. I think we've gone a little bit too far because I do think that we're going to see a little bit of regression from an Iowa State team that is currently in the top 35 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. For Iowa State, they're shooting 36% from three-point range. As it's been a big surprise what you've gotten out of Milan Mimosilovic, who's been able to give you 13.5 6.5 points on 46% three-point shooting. The gentleman from Pewaukee, Wisconsin has been tremendous. Now, you know that Iowa State is going to be able to generate those turnovers. They're getting 12.2 steals per game. Damon Lipsby is 3.5 steals per game. Towards the top of all of college basketball, he and Keyshawn Gilbert have been able to combine for about 31.5 points per game. And this Florida A&M team is still rough to say the least, but Love Bettis has been able to do a nice job of giving this team just at the very least a little bit more offensive pop. It's not great, but he's now been able to log about 13 points per game. Comes in from North Carolina A&T. It is a team that really doesn't have a lot of size. So even though Iowa State, not necessarily the most dominant of rebounding teams, when you've only got one guy in Keith Lamar who's able to give you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, that does become a little bit of an issue. And for Florida A&M, not like they're doing a great job taking care of the ball. They have turned the ball over about 13.5 times per contest for a team that ranks 227th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slog. We've seen Iowa State just take it out of so many of these lesser teams thus far this season. As you take a look at the way that the defense has been able to operate all season long, they have given up north of 71 points just twice this far this season. That came against Texas A&M and that came against DePaul. Heck, Iowa could only get to 65 points against them, as this Iowa State team over the last few years at Hilton Coliseum, they're giving up north of 20 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than on the road. Now, I will say this for Florida A&M as well. Recognize that both of these games were played in the state of Florida, but they held in there to the tune of 21 against the Florida Gators. They lost by 13 at home against Oregon, so against better competition, they've been able to hold in there. So I do think that this number getting north of 30, it's gone a little bit too far, even though it is a tough back-to-back spot for Florida A&M. I do think, though, that they are going to be held down with their offense. I do think that Iowa State is going to show a little bit of mercy to a Florida A&M team that is playing on back-to-back days. I did set my line at a 31, so going to be willing to take 32.5 for Florida A&M, and set my total 131, so diving in on the under. 306.589, 306.590 from Las Vegas. It's Howard and Texas Southern doing battle. Texas Southern, a 1.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 142. I said Howard as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to back them. Texas Southern entered into this event 360th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Part of that is due to the fact that they have played a very brutal non-conference schedule, but I mean, both of these teams have played a brutal non-conference schedule, and for the Texas Southern team, it is one that is going to need to get Deion Stroud going. Deion Stroud has been, throughout his career, someone that's been able to put the ball in the basket. During the 2020-21 season at Fresno State, he shot 35.5% from three with 12 points per game. His shooting is all of a sudden taking a fall off. He had that nice 20-point performance against Oral Roberts, just returned in the team's last game after missing the first few games in the month of December. So I do think that he's going to be able to do a nice job of being able to elevate this offense. We have seen PJ Henry be missing for a few games. He's back as well. He's able to give you about 12.5 points per game. But for Howard, you've got Seth Towns on your side. And when you've got Seth Towns on your side, you've got yourself some explosiveness. He looks like the Seth Towns that we saw about 500 years ago. And I'm not even kidding. When he was over at Harvard in the Ivy League, logging 16.5 points, 7 boards on 44% three-point shooting going into yesterday. It's a Howard team that looks to play very much up-tempo in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. And for Texas Southern, this team always tries to hang their hat on defense, but they just haven't done a great job of that this year. How can you be a team that is in the bottom 10 in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis and 320th in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis and expect to have success? It's not like Howard is some sort of a world-beater defense either, but they're more around 274th in the country with this regard. Been able to have Bryce Harris have good versatility, 15 points, 6 boards, and then you've been able to get about 11 points at 36% three-point shooting out of Marcus Stockery as well. Howard has had an issue with the turnovers, turning the ball over right around about 16.5 times per game, but for Texas Southern, they only generate about 5.5 steals per game. Other than the 5.5 rebounds that you get out of Jamar Young, you don't have a ton of rebounding either, so I do think that Howard going to be able to control this game. Did set my total at a 147.5, as I do think that they get things cranked up tempo, so looking at the over and going to be willing to lay with Howard. And then this last game is off the board. 306.591, 306.592. Texas State and North Carolina A&T do battle from Las Vegas. This game is off the board because both of these teams played very late last night, so that is why. But with Jackson State, did set them as an 11-point favorite here and made my total 149. So 148.5 or less. Going to be taking a look at the over, 149.5 or higher. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. You've got a North Carolina A&T team that does not have a single guy on the roster that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game, and it's just been a really sad defensive effort from North Carolina A&T going into last night in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And keep in mind, there's 362 Division I teams. They were 359th. Not like Jackson State has been some sort of an amazing defense either, as they're outside the top 250 with this regard as well. But they do have Zeke Cook, Jackson State does, who's been able to give you a little bit north of 6 rebounds per game. He's going to be able to win that battle down low. Now, you do have a pair of really good headline scorers in this game. London Glasper has done a nice job, averaging 18 points per game going into this event. He's someone that is able to give you a little bit from the outside as well, though only shooting about 26% from 3 thus far this season. I do think that that's going to go northward. He's been able to generate about a steal and a half per contest. And then Kat Evans, he is shooting 45% from 3 for Jackson State, logging about 2.5 assists per contest. Has been a little bit hot and cold in that game against Houston. He was held down, but it's a really good Houston team. And you do have Chase Adams to be able to help out in this Jackson State backcourt. He's been able to give you about 3 assists per game. And credit to Kamon Shell. For a North Carolina A&T team that is Glasper, not a lot else, he has been able to dole out 6.5 assists to right around 2.2 turnovers per game. And North Carolina A&T, to their credit, they are the team that takes much better care of the ball. Only about 10 turnovers per game for them. Jackson State, they are turning the ball over more around 15 to 16 times per game, but we did see Jackson State put it together. They were able to pull off that nice upset win against Missouri. They were able to hold tough against Georgetown. They were able to knock off Arkansas State on the road. It just feels like Mo Williams has things going with the team. You've got many more ancillary pieces, like even something like a Colty Young, who's able to give you 8 points per game. Meanwhile, right now for A&T, it's Glasper, it's Shell, and it's really not much else. So I did set my line to where I'm willing to lay 10.5 points with Jackson State, 11.5 or more. Going to be willing to take the points with North Carolina A&T, and then 148.5 or less. Looking at the over 149.5 or higher. Going to be diving in on the under, and that will wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @JNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks to our good friend Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports for joining me in the last segment, coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season, and that means I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.